Yep.
Okay.
And then I need to put it up on the thing. All right, man, it took me long enough. It's loading right now. I don't know what's wrong with this computer. I think it was the connection being bad or something like that.
Okay.
I apologize for that, brother. It's just loading.
No problem. Good.
It's connecting, but it's just still loading. You know, like when it's going in a circle. So,
Right.
says the meeting is being live streamed, and here we go. All right, Rahul back. We're finally in the building. It's still buffering a little bit, but we'll get to it. So, how you been, man?
Man, I've been busy, but I've been good. I've been really good. How have you been?
Yeah, that's what life is about sometimes, just being busy. So, what I wanted to actually address a few things with you today, stemming from part one when we were speaking about the curriculum and the importance of the curriculum, and also just for the viewers, Kalulik or Kaluik, I'm sorry, your dialect and how that um, how it's spoken and or the differences between that and I guess like the regular Riskin or Egyptian dialect of Nuwaubik.
Okay. Right.
So as far as the dialect Kaluik, um, what differentiates that dialect from the previous dialects?
Um. Well, one is I literally like wrote it. I wrote it out and created it. So I had a I guess a situation where when we actually started actively talking about developing our own dialect, the first thing I realized, I was like, well, look, if we're going to do this, we're going to need to have our own script. It has to be a unique script. So based on what I was familiar with from, studying the Nuwapic scripts, the various Risky and the Matriarchal, all those scripts, I kind of like had a meditation, and in that meditation, I just started kind of like writing, like I started just like creating like strokes and like different pen strokes and things like that. And eventually, I came up with some basics, like a real basic version of it, and I just kind of started working on that, and eventually came to an actual script that I got created as a font and everything, and we started to adopt it. It just was a period of just a gradual adoption of our script. That's all.
Okay, awesome. So as far as the grammar is concerned,
Mm-hmm.
is it just the script that is different, or is it the script and the grammar of the language that you've created?
There are some grammar differences within Kaluic. The majority of the grammar that's in the language is kind of an interpolation of the original Nuwapic without a lot of the extra. It kind of broke the language down to a very practical usage mechanism, which means that it's based upon the grammar in the language is based upon its usage, and the more it's used, the more you understand the grammar. So, like in the original Nuwaubik, you had like there was a 19 system, a 19 form grammar structure. I used to love that because it was just like, man, it's on point 19, sacred mathematics. But it's like people would always be like, man, that's so confusing. And I'm like, how's that confusing? And English is ridiculous. English is ridiculous.
He said English is ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm like, and like every person that I know and I've ever met who spoke English as a second language all said the same thing. Like the English language is very difficult to learn. A lot of it doesn't make sense, So the 19. So like you have a word in Nuwaubik where we would say the word zahub, to go. When you would start to conjugate it, it was so many different directions it could go in. So Annie, you can say zahub, to go. Then it was Annie azhibu, and or Annie zahabtu, or Annie sofa zahub. And then it was like you had like the what is it, the present progressive, and it was zahub, and then you had like past participle, and it was zuhiba, and it was like you had all of these various structures. And when we developed Kaluic, we simplified a lot of that. So a lot of it wasn't necessary. Our grammar structure is basically, you have a past tense, you have the and we call it the living tense of the language, where you use it and you're using it at the present moment, and then there's what happened, or the past tense. So like zahub in Kaluic would be zahub, but when I use it, I was like nuk zahub, nuk sofa zahub. It would stay the same until I said nuk zahaba. So it would be the past tense.
Right. As in I went.
I went. So we also we can use zuhiba, and that would be had went. So like kind of like a past tense, but then we still have zahub, present progressive, with the adding the extra I. So some of the things we've kept. A good majority of the basics, the foundation, we kept. Anything else is just in reference to, and like I said, the overall structure and usage literally came from my children. So like I said, I created the script and kind of like from champion the transition into a dialect that we could develop on our own. And that was the main reason. We wanted to be able to develop it on our own without any outside disturbances that came from a place where it wasn't practical to how we were using it.
Correct.
So it's like we're doing all of these different things, but we're literally using the language on a day-to-day basis. I'm in the kitchen and I'm fixing food and I'm having a conversation with my children, and we're talking. So the language is we're talking from the language. So bringing in language adjustments and changes and things like that had it started to have an adverse effect on just how we conversated, because it was like, and my children was like, it was in my hook deep, I was like, I don't like that. So they were really behind that. It was like, look, this, I thought this was our language, how come we can't allow, let the language grow, the way we let it allow it to grow. So
right.
A lot of that was the championing voice behind the construction of the script of Kaluic.
Okay, that sounds awesome, and that's what I consider like the natural evolution, organic evolution, because that's the same thing that took place with us in the Ansarul law community. Whereas even though they brought the Arabic teachers over to teach us the Arabiya Fusha, we as the children evolved the language into our own dialect, and Pops eventually got wind of it and put out the book Nubic based on the way we spoke the Arabiya. And it's the same thing. One of the biggest things that I learned about Nuwaubik, being as though I speak the Arabic fluently, is that you don't really need the 19 forms. You really don't need it to make it practical and everyday. Now, if you want to be a college professor in the language and write all these collegiate books, you really don't need it. You really don't need it.
And that speaks to the manifestations that languages have. So like even in the English language, there is the everyday language English that is spoken, but then you have that what is it considered the Queen's English, and then you have
Right.
like legalese, then you have like what I'm saying. So it's like all in all languages they have those various incarnations, and it's but that has to happen within the use of the language. That doesn't happen from another language, you know.
Right.
And I always say that about the English language. The English language is a supplanting language. So when you learn a language like Nuwaubik, um, Sabbatic, any of the Yamasic, any of the incarnations of the language, and you're learning it from an English perspective, and I tell the children, I said, this is what's happening. I said, your brain is literally creating a subfolder under the English folder, and it's creating it where it's going to always be an interpretation of an English word. And I say that because if you say something in another language, in English, the person in English says, what does that mean? And
Right.
when they ask you what does it mean, they want you to translate it. So if I say I walk up to a person and I say Yakunu Karabashi de Gruas, and you know, what does that mean? And I say, well, can I have some of that rice? So in their mind, the what I said in my language is just another way of saying in that what they said in English in their minds. So the language doesn't get the opportunity to develop as its own entity. So if you learn Kaluic from Nuwaubik, Sabbatic, any of the scripts, the Yamasic, if you learn them from a visual perspective and you learn them like I see, and we have a phrase we say, Yakul Shino Nazor, Nazor Shino Yakul. So say what we see what we say. So if it's a visual language and you're interacting with the language, then it's going to develop its own folder separate from the English folder in your brain. So you will be able to switch instead of translating. It's new sofa, new, and you'll eliminate
That's how they be too. Like that's how they be. Yeah. Go ahead, brother.
They speak in the language, and there's a lot of the uhs, and I always say is a brain fart, and that means that there's not a smooth transfer of information. And a lot of times it's habitual. It's not necessarily because we don't have the information, but it's become such a big habit that we just always say that. But when you get into the rhythm of a language, right? If you ever heard people speak like Vietnamese, or if you heard people speak, even like Spanish and like in the Latino communities and things like that, and it's a flow, it's like it's a rhythm, it's a frequency, and it's like the English language doesn't have that, right? Unless we're singing. Unless we're trying to be, you know what I'm saying? It gets when we're being sarcastic or when, stuff like that. So it's like it doesn't have that naturally. So if I'm gonna get into my language, I want to get into the energy of it, the frequency of it, the vibration of it. So that means I have to live it. I have to submerge myself into it. So and that helps, and we don't, that's one of the biggest issues that people have with learning it. A lot of people put the language down because it was changing so much. They weren't, to them, they was like, okay, it's like, how can I learn this because it's changing too fast? But then at the same token, the information was evolving, right? And then you got people that say, well, that information is changing. It's not the same as it was. Well, that's what you got to do. You got to adjust it with your mind and blah, 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 So they make an excuse for the information. But then when it comes to the language, they be like, well, I'll just wait till it's finished and then I'll learn it. Whereas what they're missing is that they're learning the language like they learn doctrine.
Right. That's exactly what you're doing.
That's not going to work. That means that if you learn a language, I've had a few incidences where I had people come and had memorized the dialogue in one of the books and started a conversation with me, and I'm thinking, oh, we finna do this, we finna have a conversation, and then once they get through the dialogue part, because I'll say something that's not in the dialogue, but and they'll be like, well, then they'll continue. And they'll be like, well, okay, well then you ready to talk, so let's talk, and I settle in, and then my next answer come out, and it's just, I'm building about whatever. And
they lost.
They always lost. And they'll literally say something like, well, I didn't get that far in the dialogue. And I'm like, what do you mean you didn't get? And it will hit me like, oh, you just remembered the dialogue. Like doctrine. It's like you're regurgitating doctrine. Right?
No, you can't do that with no damn language. That's not how that works, bro. That's not how that works, bro.
But that's
No.
literally the majority of the people who are learning languages. That's how they're learning it. They're learning it like doctrine.
When I first actually started with the Nuwaubik, uh, because I had already had a prior history in Arabic,
Yeah.
all I did was just memorize the books, all of them, and then start teaching it. Right? I didn't memorize no damn dialogue though. I needed to memorize the system. And what I learned is that a lot of the system was for maybe later use. But I learned that I created a system called Nine Grammar, Tasnahwa, and there are 9 different forms that I can teach Nuwapic in a 90-day period, where you can speak Nuwapic fluently to anybody. Now, the dialect, we named it Zarifa, and Zarifa comes from the 3-part verb zi, ri, fi, which is zaruf, which is combined. And the reason why we called it that is because we wanted to preserve all of the dialects from Nubic to the teacher's guide. You know, we had the at a glance, we had the Nuwapic simplified,
Right.
and so on and so forth, and the Riskin, which is in the teacher's guide. The teacher's guide had the most extensive dictionary, and it was the only scroll that Pops had wrote that actually had the structure of the language in it. Every other book was pretty much giving supplemental. So to maintain keeping all of the dialects, we combined all the dialects, and that's how Zarifa was born. We still use the system, but it's a whole lot more simplified. Like it's less complex. Like we still use the word zahub, but zahub to us is like a simple present. It only means go in statement form. I could say, well, we don't use the Egyptian pronouns, so we use more of the Nubic pronouns like ana, inta, inti, huwa, hiya, nahnu, hum, intum. So ana zahub. We can say ila has suk, I go to the store, or ila had dakun if you want to use that particular term. Some words we use from more than one word. Like we may use yumi, but we still use umi. Or we may use suk for store from the Nubic, but we also say dakun, right? So I omitted the continuing present infinitive, which is literally 2 forms in one. It's infinitive, and it's what you call a gerund, Gerun. That's when you actually take the continuing present and make it a noun. We went to the walking class. So walking in this mashub, in this particular sentence, would actually imply that you it's a thing, not an actual verb, right? Or right. So we omitted that just strictly for the present tense because it just, to me, it was too confusing for people to understand how verbs could be nouns. And this like, even though we have it in English, I think that some people, even though they speak English, they're what you would call functioning illiterate, meaning you know the language, but you are not educated in the language to know that, hey, that's a con noun. This is a prepositional phrase. This is, so I created it. I put together the system of 9 grammar to be able to explain to people more so how to speak the language fluently and intelligently through Ebonics, because most, of our people, we speak Ebonics. We do use the past tense participle, zuhiba, but we use it in a way to whereas, because that means it has or have been done. And then, the past tense, you already know this, that the past tense is it had been done, right? So I've cooked already. And a tubicha, right? You can say kibla, but I mean, there's no need. I've cooked. And I made the sentences more shorter to whereas you don't really have to do it's not verbose. You don't really have, like, for example, if I'm saying I'm going, I won't say enoki asibu. We just say asibu because the way it's conjugated, asibu means I'm going, whether you use enoki, ania, or ana anyways. So that's pretty much how Zarifa works.
Okay. All right. And I hear that. I love it. Like you know what I'm saying? I'm like, but that's what we're supposed to be doing. You know what I'm saying? It's like that is a direct representation of the practical application of the language, right? When we are discussing Kaloic or language period, I always stress that there has to be a place where it lives. If there's not a place where the language lives, then the language doesn't have a true home and a true purpose. right?
Right.
A language can live in concept only, right? But if it's never applied to any situation, place, or people, then it's just that, it's a concept. So the specifics within the language is how we develop it, is how we develop it. But
Right.
I'm really bit so like, use use Annie, and and like I said, that's I love that because it shows that it shows that the language is living. And so that's what it shows. Um, in Kaluic we say nu and nuya. So I am nuya, nu, I. So we base our interaction with the language off of nu and nuya, meaning, so instead of me, like you say, like instead of saying Annie as Hebrew, right? I say, nuya zahabula padakon. So it keeps it where it's like it flows with how we're living off the how we're moving off of the language. We made simple adjustments to like the pronoun structure, simple adjustments to um the overall grammatical structure. So we kept everything. We try to keep everything else unless and there's words that we like needed that we couldn't find them. So I'd be like, all
Right.
right, y'all come up with something, and the children would come up with words. So it was similar to what was happening as we were moving on moving natty, where it was like we were making it ours. But it like if we're not going to continue that process, so there should be another generation of children that are taking.
You froze. You there, brother? I think you froze. Are you there? What the heck? He might have to come back in. Let me see. You got okay? Yeah, you had froze. I was just calling you.
Oh, okay. I think that's that. I think my internet might have stopped. Might have dropped.
Oh, okay. Yes. So finish your thought, bro.
So that.
You was basically explaining how, first and foremost, the language needs a place to live.
Right.
And right, it needs a place to live. However, it's the same thing that we were in the as Mokmi Noons and Mokmi Natis in the community. We were the children who pretty much evolved Arabic Fusha into what we now today call Nubic, just like your children evolved the Nuwaubik into Kaluic. And that's gonna happen. And I think I'm proud of that because to me it's more natural. Like I don't agree with somebody sitting at a damn kitchen table and rewriting the way that we should speak all the time. Like you can't. I don't. This is my personal perspective now.
Right.
I don't believe that a language evolves inorganically like that. So I don't want the updated language. If you teach enough people to speak it and then they pass it on to their children, that's their job because you've always got new. Like for example, our definite article is still had. Like we back in the Ansoro law community, we would chop the word "hada" and just say "had," right?
Yeah.
That became the definite article. Had been, had be, had wallet, right? And and I can see exactly what you're saying as far as like with the children because it's them who actually creates the new form of the language in each generation, and they'll pass it on to their children in a certain kind of way, and so on and so forth.
Yes. It's really like, another area that we, focused on, because again, language has various incarnations. So you're going to have your day-to-day language, then you're going to have your educational language that that they're learning in certain environments, situations. You're going to have your professional version of the language. You're going to have the spiritual version of the language, and so on and so forth. So one of the things I realized was that if we're going to create spaces and places where the language lives, we have to create auxiliaries for those spaces, those environments, right? You don't just have a room and there's nothing in the room, but every time you come in the room, everybody just speaks the language, and then you leave the room. Like, no, the room has to speak to where the language is headed, right? What's being done in this room that represents the future that we need to tap into. You come into a room, there's a TV screen on, and everything that comes on the TV screen is in the language, right? That's a powerful statement. I did something when my children were younger, and I just was messing around. I did like a little puppet show. I had a little thing set up. I had my little puppets and this and that. I had my little Casio, and I had my little, I was doing, and it was just off the top of my head. But I created a video where I had these puppets in what do you call it, interacting in Nuwaubik, and
Right.
I recorded it. My wife walked in from work, saw me, she just shook her head and kept walking. She's like, he's always doing something. I mean, I'll tell you, I had a whole setup. But when I played it on television for the children, it was one of my children's birthday parties. So we always had like a house for the children. So they was watching it, and it just blew my mind because I didn't even pay attention to it. But when they saw the language on TV, it registered in their minds as something real. And right. I had to accept that this is another generation. Like we came from a different generation. Like we heard it and we interacted with the Arabic and things like that. So it was real to us. But for these children, this is the digital age. So everything is technologically advanced. So them seeing this little corny puppet show that I did, but everything was in the language. And they was mesmerized. The children were sitting there and they were just like, they had never saw something like that, because it showed them all the stuff that their parents have been talking about, and
right.
Parents like, well, yeah, we have a language. Well, you keep saying that, but when do we use our language? Well, when we make ashutat, or then when we do tones, or when we do, and it's like, really, that's it? I mean, that's just like religion. That's like Christianity. We got the Bible and we got these prayers and we got it. So when do we use it? Well, when we go to church, or you know what I'm saying? So it's like seeing it on TV like that. It did something to them, and it sparked eventually us doing music in the language, because I was like, that's powerful. Not only can you preserve your children, their voices and things like that when they were younger, but now you have a teaching tool, and this teaching tool is like, all they gotta do is listen to it. And I've had people, when we first recorded our first album in 2007, they was like, man, I've been listening to Jam Your Album, but it's like after the 7th time, it sounded differently, because now I started to be familiar with some of the tones, the words that I was hearing.
Right.
And it was like, so now it's becoming a teacher, which is why now you go to YouTube, hundreds of thousands of videos where they're using music to teach children, informational concepts. Right. So they're trying their best to influence generation after generation of our children to stay in the mind of Western curriculum, because as long as they stay in the mind of Western curriculum, and the majority of that comes through the language, then they know that they'll always have a back door into whatever we're doing, right?
I had a conversation with my wife last night about that, like how the public school system, like you have a group of people, that's a part of different, I want to call it the conscious community as a collective. Yeah. That's in the conscious community, or whatever you want to call it. And everybody's so adamant about, disseminating the wrongs of how the educational system, or how this group of people did us, and how this knowledge wasn't wrong. But they wake up faithfully every morning and adamantly send their children to a public school where they continue to process after you know better about what that particular institution will actually do to the minds of the children, and it's literally counterproductive.
It's institutional sociological insanity. We've been conditioned to be insane because we keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. You're not going to take away the celebrations of Western education from a lot of these people. They want their proms, they want their, their pep rallies, they want their football, their teams and all that. They want that because they feel that identifies them, and that's something that they can hold on to as a cherished memory, so on and so forth. Instead of saying, well, why don't we create our own? Why don't we come up with our own stuff? And and this has been my journey for like the last 20 plus years. The reality is that most people are afraid to do something different.
Afraid of what?
They're afraid of the fear that has been pumped into us by society. You'll get in trouble if you do something different. You'll get in trouble if you do something wrong. If you don't get their permission, you're gonna might as well just do this. But while I'm doing this, I'm gonna complain. So I don't want my kids to go and get the vaccination and go to school, but I'm gonna send them to school. But then I'm gonna do it this way. I'm gonna be slick and I'm gonna make it so that they don't have to get the vaccination. But your children are walking around all these other children who have the vaccinations, and now they're finding out the adverse effects that these vaccinations are having on people, and they're like, now your children are exposed to that, and they're unvaccinated. Fine, you may have them on an herbal regimen and so on and so forth, but they're still being exposed to all these energies. That's just like saying, I don't celebrate Halloween, my children don't celebrate Halloween, but every Halloween, the Charlie Brown Halloween specials on TV, we're watching it. The scary movies and all that stuff, they're doing a marathon of horror movies, and we're watching them. Just because you don't take your children to do trick or treating, they're still exposed to those energies. So it's like, right, we're not doing anything to counteract those energies. In my experience, just with the language, not even the doctrine, not even the whole how we do our, the ego aspect of us being like Ansars and the Nuwaubians and whatever. Just the language, it allowed me to keep an environment that protected the children from a lot of that negativity. But it also sparked the importance of creating our own stuff. So we made our own music. Yeah. We created our own holidays and celebrations and stuff like that. Some of the things that I took doctrinal concepts from the master teacher. And because I didn't want to go and just like take the stuff that he was doing and creating, I started creating my own stuff. We have an event that we created called Journey to Gland, based off of information that he taught us, but designed specifically to protect the children during Halloween. This is our 17th year doing it. And it's an event where the whole family come, they have fun. The children dress up as cultural royalty. The adults dress in all white as the Gigi in the clouds. And we are guardians, and they have stations, and the children have to go, and they're having fun, they're enjoying themselves, but their goal is to travel through the galaxies to reach the black hole, go through the black hole, and finally reach Riz, so they can get to enter the enclosed garden. And it's an event that we do every year, so it has doctrinal concepts and things in there for our children, but it also is protecting them from the energies. And of course, right, from station to station, their passphrases are in the language, so they get to learn the galactic language as they're doing it. So they pick so it's stuff like that. So
bro, you truly amazing, man. You got a hell of a mind. You can tell you grew up as an Ansar.
Right. So it made us. And the language it makes us. It stimulates us to function mentally at a higher level, like where. A lot of us who came through the Ansar school, Nuwaubian school, because of the doctrine, we became sharper. We were much sharper than, an average person. So we used that and we began to kind of create our own hustle in life, whether it was, career, whatever. But the language component, it puts you on a whole different plateau, because now you realize not only the fakeness of everything, but literally how easy it is to create your own paradigm. It's not hard, and it don't take, like Matthew said, all it takes is 5 good people.
5 good people?
5 good people.
We're in the game.
We're in the game. So it's like, and the reason that you don't need a lot of people is because, again, the majority of the people that's going to come through is going to be poison. because they're going to come through as wards or minions of Western curriculum. That's why we argue all the time. We debate. We love the conflict. Conflict comes from competition. Competition comes from somebody thinking that they have to prove themselves to everybody else.
Right.
In our cream history, that was not a concern. We didn't have to prove ourselves to anybody. We had conflicts that came up as a result of stuff like, somebody was in the wrong place at the wrong time, or somebody picked something up that they didn't know whose it was, and it was somebody else's, and but then the conflicts were resolved. When people started going around saying, well, we have to present ourselves in a way that makes us seem like we're better than everybody else. Now you have competition. So Western curriculum is based off of that principle, which is why everybody feels that they need to have a representation in the Olympics. That's why everybody feels they need to have a Miss America, Miss Universe, whatever beauty pageant, because we feel that we need to be included in this competitive life cycle, which keeps us distracted from anything that we can create on our own for each other. So
absolutely.
But language gives us the opportunity to step away from all of that.
So can you explain to the brothers and sisters that's Rahubat family? I see Ashagalakum, Walakum Ashul. So can you explain to the brothers and sisters that's viewing and that's in the chat, like the alchemy of the Nuwaubik? Like, how does that relate or allow the transition psychologically for us as a people?
The English language is the only language that vibrates at a negative frequency unless it's being sung. Any language, especially what they call the Adamic languages, has positive frequencies. But I mean, you can go to Europe and find languages that have a positive frequency. So it's just the English language has a purpose. When we were gifted with the language Nuwaubik, we were given a tuning fork, and the tuning fork would have allowed us to elevate our frequency to that where some of the things that kept us apart, farraka, separated, individual, by way of the English language, it would have begun to dissolve those things, and it would have allowed us to come together and begin to operate at a singular frequency.
Right.
There was a point in 1999, I believe, when the master teacher himself said he failed. He said because by 96 we were all supposed to be speaking our own language, and we could have, for lack of a better word, taken over. He said he failed, and that hit me because I'm like, man, he's taking he's taking the responsibility, the accountability for all of us, and all we had to do was just apply the language, right? There were hundreds and thousands of us all over the place who had children. And all we had to do was ensure that the children were able to communicate in the language, right? I got to the point where I realized I didn't care if my children were good at doctrine, because they still, I was pretty good at doctrine, but I was still distracted by the world. I said, what can we give our children that would allow them to not be as distracted by the world as we were? And it wasn't the doctrine. The doctrine, and like Doc said, the doctrine was for the world. That really wasn't for us. What was
right?
For
and
us?
You know what? I got a sister in the chat right now that I was speaking with the other day, Miss Rhonda, and I was letting her know that, being in the Ansar Allah community, the way that we learned the doctrine was totally different than the people that was on the outside of the world, because we had the schools. It wasn't for us like reading the scrolls and being heavy like that. That just wasn't our thing. It was more like, that's for the kafirs or the people who need to break the spell and come in. But go ahead.
Yeah. So that's what we needed. We needed the tuning fork that would allow us to put ourselves in a position that will, so when it was time to teach information, the information not only was coming, we was getting it pure, but it was coming through the language, right?
Right.
When I was when my firstborn son was 3, I was reading the Science of Creation book, and I was struggling with it. I was like, man, this book is deep. And I read it like 3, 4, 5 times trying to understand. So I said, let me try something. And I took the basic principles of the book and started to explain it to him in Nuwaubik at 3 years old. And when I
deep.
And when I finished, I looked at him and I asked him. I said, "How took that home answer?" And he looked and he was like, "Sure."
You asked him, did he understand it?
Yeah, and he's like, "Yeah, I get it." And I'm like, "What?" But then when I realized how I explained it to him, it registered with me. And at that point, what hit me was it was two things that hit me. One was it's not just the fact that we have information to teach our children. We have to create the vehicle in which that information sits when we teach it to our children.
Absolutely.
And the second thing was I had a conversation with a brother who told me that you can't think in Nuwaubik. He's like, it's not your language, but I know I don't have to explain it to you, but I'm saying when he said it, I was just like, so I asked him, I said, were you in Sadawala? And he was like, well, I came in a little bit after that. I said, so have you learned any other language in your life? And he was like, well, I learned a little Spanish, French, whatever in school. I said, so you've never spoken another language? I said, so how can you tell somebody who speaks a language that they can't think in it, right? Because my children were there and, they were babies, but Nuwaubik was their first and only language. So you mean to tell me that right now I'm speaking to my children in Nuwaubik, right? I don't speak to them in English. They hear English, but this is the language we communicate in. You're telling me that their thoughts are coming in English?
Hell no. Right. That's not how that works, bro.
That's not how it works. So over a period of time, I realized that because I created a separate folder in my mind for language, that I can switch back and forth. So I can exist in that folder where the language is and think in that language. And when I do that, I vibrate higher.
Right.
So what are we doing?
That was we're supposed to be teaching language. So okay, so another thing that I find that is very sad is that more people are so hungry to learn all of this information, and we're just gonna collectively call it doctrine, but not as motivated. I don't think that they understand like the power behind language, as opposed to, because to me doctrine breeds a lot of arguments. It has a lot of religious discourse in it, to be honest, that when I used to give people the example, if 10 to 15 of us are standing in a circle and we talking about doctrine, the first thing that people are going to say is, what y'all believe in? Y'all don't believe in Jesus? Or y'all atheists? But if 10 to 15 of us were standing in a circle communicating in Nuwaubik, the first thing they'd be like is, where y'all from? Yo, what language is that? It's not going to cause as much rift as you trying to challenge a person on a belief system that has been long established. How you see that?
And there is a scientific experiment that was done with something similar to that, where they brought people together and had them discuss various concepts, and the people, there was disagreements, there was debate, there was arguing, but then they brought a group of people together, and two of the people spoke a different language, and literally because of that and them communicating with each other, it began to unify the entire group. So that showed that, one, the English language is a divisive language, but it also shows that it's the tones that's going to start to bring about us coming together and doing what we need to do. And it only makes sense. It really only makes sense that the focus was on the information and not on the language, right? It makes sense because if the focus on the language, a lot of the energies that were able to seep into the nation wouldn't have been able to get in, because the frequency would have been too high. The reason that they was able to break the protection that was on us as Mukminon and Mukminati is because they, instead of protecting our environments, the older generations, unknowingly in most cases, weren't diligent in ensuring that our environment was protected. So we started to lust for what was out in the world, which allowed that energy to seep in, and we started to put down the protections of the language that we had just speaking Arabic, and it wasn't even our language yet. So, and we started allowing those outside energies to come in. And like I used to watch where the movie news started to long for the world out there, and I'm like, yo, you don't want that, man. We got, look, y'all don't understand what we have. But here's another factor in all of that. We are visual beings. We are visual beings by nature. So we vibe and are influenced by environments more than words. So if I walk into a building and in this building I see pictures of Nubian greatness, I see kings and queens and emperors and pharaohs, and I see, what I'm saying, I just see greatness. I'll be more inclined to want to do something that furthers whatever the mission of the building is, as opposed to me standing on a corner and somebody come walking up to me talking about that.
Right.
Help. So it's a visual thing. When Tamaray represented a visual representation of what could happen when we start vibrating at a higher frequency. And it was just a taste, right? So us not catching that, we missed the point on that, because we were supposed to be on Tamaray and nobody was supposed to be speaking English.
Right. That was like that was the first stages of us actually having our own country.
Right. And if we would have done that, a lot of the stuff that happened wouldn't have happened, because we would have protected. Look, I've had encounters with entities where when I spoke my language, like if I was with my children, I spoke my language, I wasn't a Negro anymore. I was immediately an international being.
Right. That's how that goes.
And I got the respect of an international being. So that lets me know that it's a visual thing. When they see you, they see a Negro. But when they see me and I'm in there and then I look like regular dude from around. But then I start talking to my children, or I start talking to my wife, or I start, somebody in my group, and so where are you from?
I told you that's the first question.
that changes the whole perspective. But now all we have to do from that particular point is just stay in our frequency, right? Once they ask us the question and we see that they have an interest, then we take that garb off, and now the ego takes over. Now we want to start dropping a bunch of information on them.
Yeah, nah.
Right.
We don't need all of that. We don't need all that, bro.
Exactly. Let me give you a card. I'm gonna invite you to a little place. Come and check it out. When you come to this place,
hell yeah, that's how that shit be too. Hell yeah.
You see a visual representation of what we're talking about, and we have to begin to create that. You can create music, you can create video things, you can create written, books and different things like that, but create something that is able to be the decor for an environment where the language itself lives, right?
I just got finished speaking to one of the sisters about that yesterday. Matter of fact, I see her in the chat. Basically, to me, there is no greater unifier than language. Doctrine could never in a million years unite us the way that a language would, because once when you, like, for example, I tell the students that I have, once when you learn this language, who are you going to talk to? Right. You have to have somebody to speak to. So we are connected whether you want to be or not. Otherwise, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. But the more people that come into the classes and learn the language, they don't realize that sparks a plethora of things. Not only does familyism come into play, because now language-wise, that is your family. But now, like you said, you was doing with the puppets on TV with the children. Now that makes us create things in the environment that's more relative to the language.
Right. And that's what we have to remember. If we create things that are relevant to the language, then the language itself is going to begin to grow within us. It's just like a garden. Like if you nurture it, it's going to grow, right? Our language has struggled as a whole to grow as the beautiful garden it is, because it hasn't been nurtured, right? People have it and they be like, that's just like you carrying around some seeds and you keep bragging to people that you got these seeds for this huge and powerful tree. I got some banyan seeds or some baobab seeds, but I've never planted them, right? So That's what we have to remember. This is us. This is our opportunity to be able to put something, to plant a seed where in the future our children, again, like the African proverb, will be able to sit in the shade of it. We may not even see the shade or benefit from it, but we planted the tree and we were responsible for it being there. And that's how we have to start thinking. A lot of us, and I've noticed a lot of people who have inundated themselves with doctrine to the point where they're waterlogged.
What you call a Quran waterlogged?
They're waterlogged with doctrine, and what that means is that's it. They don't know anything else. Information, and it's like, okay, what about the practical stuff? Like, where you getting your food from? Like, what I'm saying, who's making the clothes that you wear? Who is creating the vehicles that you travel around in? Who's building your houses and things like that? And they're going to always try to find a way to fit doctrine in there. And it's like, just relax. Let's talk about this on a basic level. And a lot of us, don't know how to do that. And that's where we're being stagnated, because we've been sacrificing generation after generation of our children now. We've lost 2 or 3 generations of children since we were moving on and moving that, because everybody got on this individual, this kick. I'm trying to save myself. I'm trying to prepare myself for when the crafts come, and I'm trying to, and it's like, no. It's not. It's never been about the us. It's always been about the them that's coming.
Okay, so the sister Rhonda says she has a question. She says, I have 2 actually. The first one is question: how do you teach the children without the parent being involved? I think the crucial part of the knowledge should be implemented. What's your take?
It's very challenging to teach language to children without their parents being involved, which is one of the main reasons I don't do like public classes, right? But because I created a curriculum, language is a fundamental part of that curriculum, so the children get it. But I also, the parents have to take a class. They have to take a curriculum course. They have to learn my curriculum, so they'll understand what I'm doing, what's going on, and they won't fight it. But when you teach language, and again, people always ask me, how did I teach my children? And I always say I didn't teach them. I just conditioned myself to not speak English to them. Once I did that, my brain did the rest. Your brain is going to be like, all right, if you're going to do this, then we need some more vocabulary, and it'll grab vocabulary just as fast as you learn words to new songs that you like.
Right.
Because you've done the conditioning process. You're not forcing. You're not like, I gotta study and I gotta no. Once you do it, your brain demands. Like, if you're gonna keep talking to this child, you're going to have to develop your vocabulary. So my vocabulary now, coming from speaking Arabic and things like that, it was a little easier for me. But I still had to condition myself, because I hadn't spoken Arabic in a minute back when my first son was born. So I'm speaking English all the time. So I had to condition myself to not speak English. And that's the key. When I did that, I didn't have any problems. So when it comes to teaching the children, I always tell the parents, create a space in your house where the language lives, where you can't speak English. So as your children are learning the language, they know that this is a sacred space. It becomes like a temple for them. But it also becomes a battery to the essence of who we are. We've lost the essence of who we are. And because we've lost the essence, we think that the essence is going to come from some kind of doctrine revolution or revelation.
Motherfuckers doctrined out. The niggas is doctrined out, bro. They doctrined out.
There's waterlogged, like.
Okay, and the sister Timbia says, question: once when we fluently learn the language, at that point amongst ourselves, we should only be speaking in our language, correct?
In that environment, in the environment that the language lives. Now, I turn 52 next year. And I've said this for years. When I turn 52, I'm not speaking English anymore. So if you know me or you're going to be around me, you're going to need to know my language or have a translator. That's a personal.
Bro says you need to have a damn translator.
That's a personal
thing. Bad motherfucker,
that's what I'm saying. That's a personal thing, because I realized the English is making us sick. It's making us
really
sick.
Is.
And it's
really is.
And we're not allowing ourselves to recognize that and we're making excuses as to why we feel we need to keep speaking it. But I am in the process of literally creating I'll say mechanism that will allow me to not have to speak English to nobody.
Okay, so the sister Rhonda says, I guess she's talking about you and I being Ansars. The difference is you guys grew up without the knowledge, but people that was not within the community, this has to be considered. I guess you mean we grew up with the knowledge, like, in our school curriculum in the tab, but they were outside people who learned from the scrolls and then came in. And she says this has to be considered when it comes to learning the language versus learning doctrine.
Well, you can say it has to be considered, but in the doctrine.
Go ahead, take your time, brother. I know you're trying to guide your words. Go ahead, take your time.
In the doctrine, if you look, it constantly speaks about the importance of the language.
It does.
So at a certain point, for those who can see, you will get that message. I wasn't born in a tab. I was 16 when my family moved in. So I still learned, read books on the outside, and then came in. But when I came in, I was like, the language is where it's at. And I was blessed to be of an age where I could fit into that category and learn the language. Everybody didn't have that opportunity, but it showed me why it's important that we have our own curriculum. Because if we don't have our own curriculum, the only way we know how to learn things is from their standard, their way of curriculum. Even doctrine, the way we teach it in the English language, we're using their curriculum concepts to teach it. So imagine teaching doctrine from a perspective of having your own curriculum. It changes the whole dynamic because there are specific things that you will focus on and other things that would come where we're not trying to break a spell. That's how you learn. That's how most of us who came to the information learned it. We learned the information because it started cracking parts of the spell on us, and it started leading us to what we say is the truth. If children aren't under the spell, why would you need to break it? Why would you need to teach doctrine that way? They would have to learn it a different way. My son learned about the holy tablets by memorizing all of the faces in there at 3 years old. That's how they learned about the holy tablets. Then we just told them stories about the characters.
Yeah, that's how we learned though. But that's how we learned in the past. They just tell, you got coloring books and, they may say, well, Mother Ninty is da 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 da, or right. Such and such. It just was stories, like literally stories. Right. Nobody had to sit down and read no extensive question and answer book, memorize, go through the Bible and the Quran. And I think that does make a difference for people. Mm-hmm. And so like the sister that's actually asking the question, she's real close with me. She's one of my students. And so I told her, because of the interpretation that they had developed by studying that way, that isn't our interpretation of the way that it actually is growing up in the community. So I felt it was necessary to pretty much just teach them the way we actually learned it in the community. Just, bro, and language has to be a part of that. Language has to be, because the information traveled through Arabic. It didn't travel to us through English. We had an Arabic education. To me, like I try to, and maybe you could do a better job at this than I can, but the Nuwaubik is Nuwabu. Nuwaubik is the doctrine. You understand what I'm saying? Nuwaubik is the doctrine in totality, though. It's not just you reciting what was written as far as in the books. It's the social, political, economic, and spiritual construct of Nuwabu all in one.
Right. Nuwabu literally is the internal representation of what Nuwabu is. The doctrine is just the clothing, the garments that you can take off and put back on when it suits you. But the language itself is you and the movement in your existence. That's what it represents. And anything that functions in that capacity, you can't learn that like just information, because it has to be something that becomes a part of your everyday life. we had an environment as Ansar, as Mopinati, because we lived. It was like the language. Like you would come moving to the tab, and then the children would move with the children. Then the parents, and a week later they come back and they can't understand their children. So it's like we created it. That was the first concept of creating that environment where the language lived. It lived with the children. So if we can understand that principle again, and this is about conditioning your mind, right? Remove the doctrine, remove the dedication to the whatever, and just think about how your mind functions, right? Think about the fact that we have committed to memory thousands upon thousands of songs, right? We didn't learn them in a classroom. We didn't, you know what I'm saying? But if we was to play a list of music, and there was a group of us, a good majority of us would be able to sing almost every last one of those songs. And we'd be like, man, I remember this. This is a jam. We from the 50s, 60s, all the way up to the 2000s and nows. We'll be able to sing songs. And that proves that you can condition your mind to do whatever you want it to do if you give it the proper environment. And music represents frequency, tone, vibration. So of course we're going to vibe. We're going to move with that because that's speaking to us. So language is the next thing. So if we create the space or the environment for the language to do exactly to us what music is doing to us, conditioning your mind to learn it, it's going to be a piece of cake. You can learn it. Like I watched a child hang around one of my sons, and in 2 weeks was speaking the language, speaking Nuwaubik fluently. I didn't even know that they had learned it like that. We had a family that moved in with us. I went back home to Chicago, and a family had moved in with us, and they had a son who was 2 years older than my 4-year-old at the time. So he was 4, and the little buddy was 6. They bonded, and they was together. They was running all over the place. I didn't even know what was going on. I'm in the kitchen cooking. They come in the kitchen and sit down, and they start talking about what I'm doing. And it took a minute for me to register, like, they're not speaking English. Like that young boy didn't say anything in English. And I turned around, and I'm like, look my roof, good. And he looked at me, he was like, Tua. And I'm like, well, okay. And he pointed at my son. He taught me. So I'm like, the power of the mind to be able to grasp something, right? And we have to remember the English language makes us put so many barriers and limitations on what we can do.
Yeah.
The English language has kicked our ass when it comes to our mental potential. We'll say it immediately, something come up, but what about? You're about to put a barrier on yourself when you say that. Somebody say, well, look, man, you have the ability to learn something in 24 hours. But what about you've already started fighting against the brain's potential.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
So it's that that tonal thing. Like we do tone exercises, and literally this is a Dr. Karaam thing. So if you ain't see anybody else doing it, they got it from me. I don't care what they say.
Well, I'm definitely gonna bite you. So go ahead. So spill the beans.
So we'll take a phrase. So like something simple, Ucha ila Antutin, right? So we'll take that. Ucha ila Antutin. So we greet, it's like a greeting.
That's like hello to you all, yeah.
Yeah. But we're doing it around. So we'll be like Ucha ila Antutin, Ucha ila Antutin, Ucha ila Antutin, Ucha ila Kum. And we repeat that, right? And then as I'm saying it, somebody will come in on the next beat. So it'll be like Ucha, Ucha ila Antutin. Then we'll do it 4 times. Ucha, 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 Ucha. And we'll continue doing that. That literally allows us to create, for lack of a better word, a craft, a tonal craft. And we do tone exercises like that. And that's a very big part of the learning of our language. So people pick up on our language really fast because we be doing stuff like tone exercises.
Right. It's almost like if you put it in a rhythmic way, it just burns itself in a person's memory, no different than a song that keep playing on the damn radio.
Keep playing on the damn radio, exactly. So, and we're utilizing this is just our sciences. When we were moving that, we memorized Quran, right?
Right.
So we Everybody knew Fatiha. We go through the whole thing. But then
Right.
when we did Kalwa and we Alif Lam Mim and we go and we ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة and we run through the first maybe 25 ayats of Surah Al-Baqarah, or then we'll start from Nas and then we'll go from Surah Al-Nas up as far as we can go. That was a rhythmic thing, right? And
Right.
it was and that was just what we did. So we were burning it into our minds, our brains, because we were we were exposed to rhythmic representations of it. So that's all we have to do, is just to keep that energy up, right? We started doing the supplications in the gold book. So my children started memorizing those. You know, and then we go into the supplications. And we memorize those. The 13th supplication is the prayer of the black light, the longest supplication in the gold book. When our children or any of our students memorize that supplication, they get initiated into an order that we created, right? What is it? The order of the tones. So they become protectors of the tones. But we're just carrying on that legacy that was given to us, right? Then we started doing the music. So now it's like another Nuwaubik and that, another and we're doing music and we're doing songs. It's a love song that me and my wife have. It's called in the language. And we're talking about divine love, of course, but we're, you know what I'm saying? We're creating. So think about how many genres of music we listen to, how much music we can create in our language.
Man, you're fucking awesome.
So this is a part of like continuing the legacy of what we were given. And that's all we have to do, is to think in that energy. What is the legacy that we were given by the master teacher? How can we translate that legacy for future generations of us? And don't get tripped up and caught up all the way. Again, my greatest jewel.
They can't see you. I got the video off because I got a piece.
Oh.
Hello?
Yeah. You hear me?
Yeah, my wife. All right. I had to use the bathroom. Hold on.
Oh, okay.
Okay, go ahead, brother.
All right. So you caught me. I'm in another zone. I'm not. Where's my thoughts? So we create all these different things with the language through the rhythm, and as we create these things through the rhythm, what we're doing is we're allowing ourselves to etch them in our brain. And as we're etching them in our brain, what's going to happen, and this is just a natural process, the brain is going to demand more. It's going to demand that there's more, you need more vocabulary, you need more visuals, you need more representation within the language, you need more. It's going to demand it. And it's not going to be like, well, you should do this. It's going to like make that happen because you've already set the catalyst for it, right? And I always say the children are the easiest area to set the catalyst for, because if you can convince yourself, it doesn't matter how old, well, if they're 7 years and under, and you just say, well, look, we're not going to commit. It's just the same thing as you say, we got our own secret code and we're going to use our own secret code. And you have, with the children, you be like, this is going to be our new code. We're not going to speak. Whenever we come into this room here in the house or this area, we're not going to speak any English, right? Make it like a game. Make it like a, you know what I'm saying? Make it where it's enjoyable to them. You know, reward them when they do it. Because when they're older, the English language has already taken effect. So you got to be a little bit more creative. But if they're babies, then just don't speak to them in English. If they 4 or 5 months old, then just stop. But again, it falls on us. We become the farmers and the holders of the seeds. So if we can't do the initial work where we dig the hole and place the seed in it, then we can't expect to have a harvest, right? And then because there's a lot of people that say, well, I want to learn the language first, right? I'm like, and then what? You learned the language, right? You had the opportunity for your children to learn it. You didn't teach them. Now they have no interest in it. So now you have to find some people that speak the language who did the same thing as you did, but the language still has no real, like this need. Just like
So do you think, well, like, let's say, for example, I have a few sisters who have children who are students learning the language. Do you think that they should teach the children as they go instead of waiting till they complete the process and then teaching them?
Yeah, if and even better, the children should be in class too. Children would be an incentive for the parents. They can be an incentive for the parents. If that's too disruptive, then the parents should teach it to the children. Like I think every class so when I do teach the language, I always tell my students, I say, you have to find a place where the language lives inside of your house and create it, whether it's a closet, whether it's a corner in your room, but you have to find that place, and that place is going to become like your language, your tone altar.
Well, that's how my Umi was. My Umi was like that. Like you speak English in the house, you getting spanked. Straight up. Exactly. You getting spanked, bro.
See what she did. She had the whole house. And that's what I did with my children. It was the whole house. Like I couldn't speak English to my children. Like just in general, like, I might have needed to say something because like a lot of times there are things that you want to relate to your children that I feel the language is too pure to relate it to. And I'll just say it in English. But like my youngest is about to be 18, so you know what I'm saying? So
they damn near like we was as answers, just
right.
Going.
Right. I'm waiting for the grandchildren. So, I got a few that's coming through. One of my grandchildren, my son is already, he's for the most part, he's on it. He's making sure that he's exposing him to just the language, or if not just Kaluic, then Kaluic and African languages and things like that. So, but definitely no English. So that was my only, and I told him, I said, that really is my only request of you all. I was like, when you start having children, do what I did with you with the language. Whatever else you decide to do, that's your business. But keep that language going, because the more you keep that language going, the stronger it becomes, the stronger the essence of it becomes. And then eventually the need for it will grow, right? It's easy for the folks to come, like the government can come right now and be like, that Nuwaubik that these people are speaking and all that stuff, it don't have no purpose. So y'all are banned from speaking it.
Yeah. In South Africa, that's how that's how the apartheid was doing.
Exactly.
Like they'll try to ban your language. But another sister, the sister Rhonda, has another question. She says, correct me if I'm wrong, but what group of people you're trying to reach? What plan you have in place to reach the masses of the people that have not been exposed to the doctrine?
Good question. I'm not. I'm not trying to. I'm trying to create something that's so strong that I know that the children, my descendants, and the people that are around me now, our children are straight. Once I've done that, it will create a module that people will be able to come and find out and learn about, but they'll have to learn about it by the respect of the language that's already established there.
So what you're saying in a nutshell is the language is the catalyst. The doctrine must travel through the language. It's not like you're saying we're not going to teach them the teachings, but it's going to travel through the language.
Right. They're going to have to come into, so when the language stands on its own and begins to move as an entity of its own, it's going to demand things. It's going to demand science and technology. It's going to demand history and archives. It's going to demand what health and wellness and food production distribution. Is going to demand all of these components within itself. As it's demanding those things, the people who use it will begin to create those things. people on the outside who have not been exposed to it will see that and will want to be a part of it, but will have to go through the proper channels.
Just like now, I don't mean to cut you off, but just like now, because there is a demand for the doctrine, but the language is like the main catalyst. I'm translating the holy tablets in all Nuwaubik. That's why I got you to send me the actual fonts, so that I can translate the doctrine, translate the holy tablets in Nuwaubik, and then create a curriculum out of the holy tablets. So that would be the way that you actually learn holy tablets. Like, I don't want to actually teach the holy tablets in English. I would like the holy tablets to be taught to my students and their children purely in Nuwaubik. And I'm not even putting no English in it. It's going to be the script, then it's going to be the transliteration, the translation, and then I'll give the tafsir or the exegesis inside of the translation.
You know, there was already a new Nuwaubik holy tablets.
I've never seen one in all Nuwaubik.
Yeah, and it was one I've actually had one of my, held one, but I don't think they made many of them. And because the people who probably was responsible for holding them didn't know the language, probably didn't do anything with it as well. So I'm just to put that out there. Now, when it comes to curriculum, you don't have to create a curriculum. Come to me. I got a curriculum. I just help you put it in the format. There's no reason to do that.
Oh, brother, you don't even have to. I've already done put that in my mind, brother. I've already done put that in my mind.
I mean, and that's why I created it. I created it for us, and on the first call, I think I was explaining about how I was attacked for doing what I was doing with the education. And everybody that attacked me is either nowhere around or has completely re-submerged themselves back into the world. So the process, the progress that you stopped by blocking me was for nothing, because now you're not even doing what you said you were supposed to be doing in reference to education and so on and so forth. So I'm just like, that shows me that you were a pawn. You were being used as a pawn against the greater good. So I created a curriculum, and I'll help anybody get the curriculum. Like I said, I was helping the Sabaeans put together an educational curriculum. I don't really know what they did with it, but I helped them put one together, with their language and everything. And I was just like, look, if we don't, we find too many reasons to not work together, too many, right? And then we wonder why the arms of oppression are so heavy on all of us, because the people that are beings that are oppressing us aren't too full of themselves to not work together to oppress others. They'll fuss and argue, whatever, but they know that they can come together to create something bigger that will allow them to squeeze in resources and life energy out of the other people. So we haven't figured that out yet. There's no reason. Like I said, I don't really feel the language, the Sabbatic script, and everything like that. I love the fact that we have languages and various scripts and things like that, but I can't allow that to stop me from saying, well, look, if there's an opportunity for us to do something and grow that we can benefit from, then let's do that. Now, if they don't want to reach out towards me, then that's fine. But I understand the sickness that's over all of us. And I understand that sickness is in Western education and in the English language. So if the sickness, if they're going to, and again, that quote that the math teacher said in 2001, there's going to come a time where the more English you use, the more it's going to place you back under the spell. And it'll be a spell that even I can't break. That is burnt into the skull the deep recesses of my skull. And that motivates everything I do. That's why at 52, I'm done with English. I'm good, right? So the folks better have some stuff in place where they can come and learn, and I'm like, and I'm not doing it like to spite anybody. I'm doing it because at a certain point, when I was 18, I felt that I was done spiritually. I was like, yo, I'm done. I'm ready to move to the next plane. And my ancestor was like, no, fool, you gotta go through the school of family. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And it was like, all right, don't want to do it if you want to. And I conceded. I said, I'll do it. Don't hurt me. So I went through the school of family, and now as I am nearing the completion of that school, right? Of course, you got families forever, but I'm nearing the completion of the school of it. I'm ready to get back to that state when I was 18, because I was nice when I was 18 spiritually. And I felt like I didn't have any attachment to any of this stuff out here. I could be like, I'm good. I didn't have to do anything. But now I'm at a point where I realized, okay, there were things that had to be put in place so that the next generation of me can do the same thing. Right? So that would be selfish for me to just do it. And then all my children's out here suffering and struggling in the world and going through all this stuff. And I'm riding my magical unicorn through the cosmos. So I had to go through this school. So as I put this together, I want to make sure something is being left for the children. So there's curriculum, right? There's an environment, a space where the language lives. There's music, there's games and activities and events and things. There is an autonomous structure that the curriculum gave birth to, right? The curriculum spoke to me and said, if you're going to do this, then you're going to need to be able to govern yourself. And the autonomous governing structure that the curriculum inspired me to create is a matriarchal governing society that it has to come from like thousands and thousands of years in our story. Because it came ancestrally. It came through my mother, my grandmothers, right? Like they telling me to write books and stuff about the matriarchy. I'm like, I'm a dude. How you gonna tell me I'm a boy? I'm gonna write, and they like, but I understood the message, and the book I wrote is a letter, like a letter from the patriarch to the matriarchy.
You have another, I didn't mean to cut you off, but you have another question. Purple Royal says, does the language support or help to create a new mindset?
It absolutely does. I can't express how much it does. If you would have met me before my journey in language, right, you would have met a completely different person. If you would have met me before the birth of my first son, you would have met a completely different person. So Arabic gave me a different mindset, but Nuwaubik and now Kaluic, completely different. I don't see things like everybody else sees things, right? And I'm good, and I like it. It's lighter. I'm much lighter with it. My mentality-wise, I don't trip out on a bunch of stuff. I don't hold on to things. Like I can't even hold grudges. I be trying to. I can't even hold a grudge because it don't make any sense anymore. So it's like it helps. It's a healing. It's not just a physical healing. It's a genetic healing. It allows you to really start to heal the genetic trauma just having the language and practically applying it. Just do this, like with your class. Just take your class and y'all come together and make a song in the language and in your script. Make a song, and just everybody's participation and involvement in it is going to be a healing principle. But then the finished product for them to listen to over and over again, it's going to be a healing concept. That you'll be able to feel it, like, man, I did this. This is my voice right there. It's in the language, and here it is. It's powerful. It's very powerful, and I can't even like really describe what it is, but I understand what I feel. I can probably describe it in Kaluic, but
Okay, I have a question. So I'm teaching the classes online. I've actually, this is my first time ever teaching online because I've always taught people from mouth to ear in person. And it's going really well. But my question is, teaching the children, because I only know one way to teach children, that's just speaking to them. Like I just sit there and just talk to them.
Right.
That's just how I do children. Like I don't expect a child to have the attention span of an adult. And I don't think that it's necessary to sit down and break down the 3-part verb and put the A here and that's more for adults because of the comparison of the language that they spoke first. How would you advise me to go about basically starting the children's class online? Because most of my students, well, not most, all of my students are in different states or in different countries.
I would start first putting a curriculum together where the curriculum is completely interactive, meaning everything that you do with the language is a project. So it's not So the Western curriculum module is designed to teach linearly. So it's that straight line. When you can teach from a perspective of intuition, you're creating things, you're allowing the children to be a part of a creative process that they are partly responsible for. So everything that you do, it should be just about creating language auxiliary resources in the environment for them. So
give me an example.
So let's create a hard or fat board. We're going
to create a hard or fat alphabet.
We're going to take these, we're going to write our hard or fat, and then we're going to cut them out, and we're going to get poster board, and we're going to glue them on a poster board. We're going to hang them up. We're going to create some hard or fat flashcards. We're going to get them out, have our parents help us laminate, and we're going to create flashcards. We're going to create visual word cards. So we're going to put a picture of something on the front, and then we're going to put the word in the language in the script on the back. And maybe the pronunciation in the English language, like the Englebic, we'll put that on there. No English, right? They see what it is, and then just, okay, this is what it is. So I don't have any, I usually have stuff like that around me, but I've been relocating my office and stuff, so I'm still unpacking. So so you have a flashcard, visual flashcards. You create things like allow them to come up with rhythmic ways to say certain words. So you have your Greeking words, your ucha, your rahubad, you have all your various words, and come up with creative ways to say them, where they can put it in rhythm, but just make sure that everything that they're doing is activity or a project. Don't have let's sit down and let's go over this and let's take out, no, don't do that. And at every opportunity, give them an opportunity to do something visual or take a picture of something to show what their progress is and that they're doing something.
Okay, that's easy.
Exactly.
That's easy.
That's how they learn anyway.
That's easy and simple. Yeah, because like when I was teaching like my nieces and nephews, it wasn't that hard. All I did was just talk to them and tie it to their survival. Or you want juice? You better learn how to say Yakunak Andi or can I have or may I have Asor or Moya or Portugal Asor or whatever you want. You ask me in the language and you'll get it. If you don't ask me in the language, you definitely won't get it. And they caught on fast. They caught on real fast. They want muhlat, cookies. Yeah, anything they want, I make them say it in the language. And they learned in a very short amount of time.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
So that's a good thing. So doing the flashcards online, because I'm still learning this technology thing now. I'm getting a few of the sisters to pretty much help me. I reached out to a sister yesterday, and I'm gonna reach back out to her today because I was trying to do the ebooks and put my books out, but I learned that this morning. I started putting the ebooks together this morning, but I'm trying to, and I think I asked you this in your messenger, like being more effective with the online process.
Right. It's definitely a learning curve for it. I'm not as technologically astute as I would like to be. I always ask my children for help or reach out, so and most of the things that I've learned, I've taught myself, and it's been trial and error. When it comes to, so like I have an online a home correspondence program for my curriculum for children. So I have children that are and things like that. So when we do but this is education, it's the whole thing. Like, you know what I'm saying? We have 19 subjects and you know what I'm saying? So, but it's kingdom building curriculum. Aloic is one of the components within it. So I've learned how to be very interactive with them when it comes to this. So we have our moments where we sit and we discuss concepts, and I'll talk to them about different things, which is the beautiful thing, because you can have doctrine conversations with the children, and you ain't got to worry about all that craziness from Western society, and you can just drop jewels on them, blah blah blah. But it gives you the opportunity to be able to just kind of like develop yourself. You can say, well, how can I take this information and break it down and explain it to a 3-year-old? Right? How do I take this? How do I take science of creation, or how do I take a concept like the holy tablets, or how do I take, any kind of informational concept and break it down and put it. And what I learned is that when you can create activities and projects that link up and line up with each other, that's a
Right.
that's a very powerful tool in your own, process in your own development. So um, it's like it's challenging to discuss it when you're dealing with people who've only known Western curriculum. So I always welcome people. I say, well, look, let's talk, let's have this conversation about curriculum. I actually have a whole video presentation I did. It's on YouTube somewhere. I can share it with you where I explain the entire curriculum. I usually give that to parents who are interested in learning, and putting their children in my program. And how we're doing this, how we move forward and all of that is based upon all of the work I've done over the last 20 years with curriculum. I've really been, man, it's been a journey. So like I can take any subject matter and I can break it down and put it in my curriculum, and whoever's the author of that subject matter, now they become authenticated and can now certify and degree in that information. So
Gotcha.
with your language, like with your dialect of the language, I would assist you by creating a series of workbooks within my curriculum format for you. And then you would use that and you would teach the language. But then we created a workbook for you within my format. So now you can issue certifications for the language, right? So you've authenticated yourself, as opposed to me being the, some people always say, well, it's your curriculum and blah blah blah, and I'm like, yeah, it's the vehicle.
I don't get into all of that. Everybody has various different expertise. Like I don't have that type of issue. It's more so is if this works and this vehicle pretty much can convey the message and achieve the result, then I'm all for the result. The end result is what I care about, not who the hell created it.
But see, the importance of the vehicle is that the vehicle determines the destination overall. So Western curriculum's vehicle, the destination is world supremacy and domination by those folks who created it.
Right.
So you can get in there and learn a lot of stuff, but at the end of the day, there are components within it that keep you, loyal to the destination of that vehicle. So at some point, you're going to go back and you're going to give them their, you're going to go back and be like, okay, well, let me jump back in here but with our own vehicle, and the destination of our curriculum is the healing of the planet and the restoration of the indigenous. That's the destination of our curriculum. So the vehicle is there. So your lesson plan being in that vehicle, the vehicle is going to ensure that your lesson plan gets as much support as it needs so that it can be successful in whatever you want it to and have it to do, without the extra stuff, without the programming, without the indoctrination, without all that stuff. And that's another reason why the language is literally the vessel that information should come through, because if it don't, you can start indoctrinating in the English language, which is what has been happening with our information. People are being indoctrinated with doctrine. So instead of you a free thinker, now you are a religious zealot with Doc's information.
Basically, that's exactly what that is.
Yeah.
I don't think that they see it that way for some reason. And me personally, I guess because of the way that we grew up and the way that we learned the information, it's not important as it is to other people. Like to me, Nuwaubik is to the forefront. Always has been, always will be. And I think that I think that just the mere fact that we do have our own language to actually place us in, the spectrum of a group of people that has a total way of life. I think that even if I was like hardcore on teaching the doctrine, it would still be through the language anyway. So language is still going to be to the forefront.
But that changes how the doctrine is taught. When you start teaching to the language, it changes how it's taught. It literally changes how it's taught. I've been teaching doctrine through the language for like 25 years now, and it's not taught the same way we learned it in question and answer class, and
Right.
that's significant because there's a lot of fat on doctrine because we're under the spell that has to be added to appeal to what happened to us. Children don't need the fat; they just need the lean, the good cuts. And when you teach the good cuts, then they don't become zealots with it. It just becomes a part of their process, and they're able to navigate themselves much better because they don't have the hangups, they don't have the fears, they don't have a lot of the stuff that kind of kept us back and that we had to fight through to even get to the doctrine. They don't have that because we can just give them the lean part of it. They're better.
Right.
They're better people. You know what I'm saying? They like overall they're better people. They genuinely care. You know what I'm saying? They're not always trying to get over on people. It's a lot of stuff like that that we're able to circumvent because we're not giving them the indoctrination.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So let me ask you this. How many speakers would we need in the language in order to be recognized as an independent language speaking group?
Recognized by who? Oh, well, okay.
Of course not us, because I mean it could be just the family.
Technically two people.
Two people.
Yeah, you just gotta have your paperwork in place for it. That's all.
Well, hell, I got two people around me now. What? In my house.
That's what I'm saying. Like my core group is 10. But it expands to people who are learning the language. It moves us up in the 20s and 30s. So close to the 50 rank. But you don't really need all, I mean, because they'll tell you need a roster with like 50 people to be considered a tribe and things like that. But there's ways that you can circumvent all of that.
Gotcha.
So that's another call.
Okay. So I'm definitely going to reach out to you for the curriculum. And again, I'm putting together a dictionary for the dialect because the teacher's guide has the most extensive dictionary, but it's only like translation, like it'll give you go in English and then it'll give you Zahub. But I'm going to actually put the Zahub and then put the actual definition to put together the whole dictionary. And I think that would be.
You're doing a definitionary. Okay.
A definitionary.
Okay.
Right. Of all the words of Nuwaubik. I've recently started on TikTok, and so by today I'll probably have about a good 75 to 100 TikToks and on the language. And I usually share what I share to TikTok, I share to my Instagram because it's more easier with short videos. Because you only do 1 to 2 minutes, and so I may just give the pronouns, or I just may give conjugations of a few words and things of that nature. So that's pretty much a few things that I have going on. I'm trying to get my teachers together right now. I'm teaching to get my teachers together right now so that the school will pretty much have the teachers to actually support it.
Are you teaching your teachers?
Yeah, I'm teaching the teachers right now. That's my goal.
Okay. Yeah, let's build about the curriculum because.
All right, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Build about the curriculum because
before you go into that, I just want you to answer this one sister's question. She says, what broke the spell, the science of the knowledge or the language? I know the answer to this.
Is it for me or just generally?
I think it's generally.
What broke the spell is I would say the language, but it's at the point where a person who might have found the language by way of the doctrine, when they got to that point where they realized that this was the key. So the language has always been the tool to break it, but the doctrine was like the setup. It was like the breadcrumbs that brought you to it. And also, while it was the breadcrumbs, it was also like adjusting your DNA for you to even be able to recognize it. That's why they say many are called, few are chosen, and even fewer will make it. So it was the breadcrumbs and the preparatory material to lead you to the tones. So it's the tone, it's the language that's going to be that's going to so you're familiar with the genetic tumble, how we tumble down genetically and we hit the bottom.
Absolutely.
So now it's time for us to tumble back up. It's the language that is going to be responsible, that's going to be a catalyst for us doing that. You're not going to tumble back up on the same devices that were a part of your tumble down in the first place. You're not going to use the same tools that captured you and kidnapped you or whatever, that you're going to use them to build you back up. You're going to have to get some new tools. So it's the language that is literally going to be the thing that breaks the spell, even though you were prepared with the information. So the information just, again, it adjusted your DNA. It made you who you really were. So if you were a benevolent, angelic being that had been like covered under, suppressed under all this nonsense, the doctrine made you able to open those wings up. If you was a jinn, it did that. It made you a very efficient jinn. So it just depends. It made you who you really was, and it amplified that. So now it brought you to the point where, depending on what type of being you are, you can break the spell, or you can become the fullness of what type of being you are, which will again put you under even deeper spell or whatever. So it's that language. And when we made the statement about the more English you speak, the more it'll place you back under the spell, that speaks to a whole lot that people don't pay attention to. Because if that's the case, then why are we still having discourse in the English language, right? Why is there no place set up where we can come together, our representatives, our ambassadors, and have a discourse in the various dialects of the language that we speak?
Absolutely. And if you, just to further your point, Pops always said the spell is always in the spelling of the words. The spell travels through the language, and it's English was the language of the spell. So to keep English means you actually keep the spell.
Keep the spell.
It's just that simple.
Right. So what would make you think that words in the English language, even though those words were talking about deep and insightful information, that those words that were being used by the spell language was going to break the spell? So that shows where the significance of the language comes into play that many people missed. So many people missed it.
Well, our time is up. Is there any more questions in the chat? Also, I'm gonna drop the brother Cash App in the chat if y'all want to show the brother some love. We are still trying to build this school, so I want y'all to basically present y'all questions so we can let the brother answer your questions. Our time is almost up. Yeah, but brother, I think that to me, and you feel different when you speak Nuwaubik from English. Like when I'm in conversations in Nuwaubik with people versus conversations in English, it's a different feeling.
Yeah, I can't even fuss at my children in Hollywood. I if I need to fuss, I have to speak English. So it makes sense. Like, why are you fussing? It makes me think. It puts you at a higher frequency. It really does. If I'm upset with my children about something that they did, I get to this. I go into like this sage mode, and I'm just like, I'm explaining stuff to them in the language, and I'm like, look, man, you can do better than that. You're better than that. And I don't, what I'm saying? I don't feel any kind of way, because it's like the language has shown me, like, dude, all that extra stuff ain't necessary. Like, why if it's not necessary, why are you walking around with all those extra bags? We walk around with emotional baggage, with mental baggage, spiritual baggage, all kind of stuff, and we feel that we can't let it go, because we might find something to put in one of those bags that will validate why we're holding on to that bag, and so on and so forth.
So with your curriculum, what is the actual power in teaching that specific way?
The power is we control the destination. We control the end result for the student. We control the frequency of what we teach, and it gives us the ability to take any information that we acquire and filter it for our uses and our purposes.
Okay. So yeah, I'll talk to you about that offline. So let me go back to the chat. Okay. Purple Royal says, how long does it take to learn?
That is completely dependent upon how long it takes you to condition your mind. It can be 3 months, it could be 6 weeks, it could be 6 months, right? It could be a year, it could be 2 to 3 weeks. It's just how long it takes you to condition your mind and to make the choice to learn the language from a visual perspective that allows it to have its own folder. Meaning, you don't want it to be a translation of English, right? So when you're teaching, like if you're in a class and you're teaching and you say something, aslon faso naso vazab ua pa tarochet shel pa gadim lihumo fi fi sheftat na and you're explaining your concept, and somebody says, what does that mean? If you translate it, right, then you've given them the opportunity to say that this Nuwaubik word is nothing more than another way of saying this English. So you want to pull it away from the English as far as possible. So instead of saying, so like when if I have a student and they say, well, what does that mean? I say exactly what it means in Kaluit, right? So I'll say Pashajur Ajutmo, and they're like, what's that mean? Well, Nuya Kalaman Pashajur, Ash Kalanganshi di Gadur Kharuj, while Dinazur Mithu, and I'm explaining what it means in the language. And they'll look at me and I'm like, oh, you meant, what does it translate as? I said, didn't say that, because that's the English language tricking your mind. It's trying to make you create a folder. I know some Nuwaubik, I know some Kaluit, and they'll drop a word on you, Rahu, bad, I know that word. And you can tell it's coming from the English language. So it's not sincere, it's not within them. So it's like, okay, that's cute. I'm good. I don't, what I'm saying, I don't need to discuss anything with you anymore. So, but it's as long as it takes you to condition your mind, to say, at this particular point, I'm not going to use English in this particular setting or situation, right? I've created a space. I have children. I say, well, I'm not going to speak English to my child anymore. Then you start the process of conditioning your mind. So your mind says, I bet you can't do it. And that's the English language, right? And you'd be like, I bet you I can, punk. So you start the process, and then after the first 2 weeks is the hardest, because it's gonna always be something that distracts you to make you accidentally do it. Once you get past those first 2 weeks, then you slip into like a zone, and then eventually your brain is like, okay, they're serious about this, and then it literally shifts, and you're like, all right, and it creates a folder over here, and now you got this folder. So what you gonna do with this folder? This folder needs more, and the folder is going to demand it. So it's going to make you physically go and get books and pick up and learn new words. It's going to make you do it, right? But that is determined by how long it takes you to condition your mind the first way. Because everybody wants to learn the language, everybody wants to be able to use it, but the question is, are you going to use it practically? Are you just learning it as like a novelty? So I could just say some words with somebody and sound heavy, like a lot of Ansars used to do. They didn't know Arabic, but they knew like Fatiha, and they would use that. I watched a brother out trying to impress somebody who was out peddling and said Fatiha because he told somebody he was fluent in Arabic. And I was just like, but that, I ain't gonna say nothing. I ain't gonna say.
That's not conversational Arabic, brother.
I'm not gonna bust his bubble.
Unless it's the Kalam Arabia.
Right.
Unless it's the Kalam Arabia.
So they don't, they, you know, so, and, but that's what people do. People do the same thing with Nuwaubik. They do the same, I mean, it doesn't matter. So it's like, you know, that's the sincerity. That's the truth of it. If you create a school of language, school of Nuwaubik, right? The principle is that the school eventually should become a museum. It should eventually become a conservatory. It should eventually become a mall. It should eventually become a restaurant. It should eventually, you know what I'm saying? It should eventually become all kind of different things.
A society, in a nutshell.
A society.
So Purple Royal says, does it process or eliminate the ego differently?
Yeah, it processes it. You can't eliminate the ego. The ego is a part of you. So I give you an analogy. So they say when in ancient Tamaray, they say when you pass, they would wear the mask because it would help them so that they could get past the monsters and stuff that they would come across. So it was like a disguise, right? So your ego is like a monster and it's looking for any little reason. It's a monster, but in actuality, it's a little scared kid behind a closet, behind a curtain in the closet. But it's looking for anything to attach itself to so that it can be in its monstrous presence. When you start speaking any language other than the English language, what happens is it gives you an access route around it without having to interact with it, right? The ego, and I could tell the difference. Like in English, I can sense my ego. I can sense it, right? And I've gotten this, and it's just from like speaking the language over a period of years and stuff, but I can sense it and I can feel when it's coming. And so I can stop it. I can okay, no, I ain't gonna give it, I'm not gonna feed it. But when I speak Kaluic, I know it's there, but I don't sense it. Like it's on a different frequency. So it doesn't, you know what I'm saying? I don't, because it's funny because like we was making music. So, of course we from the hip hop generation. So hip hop is literally a way to direct your ego. Like it's like I'm the freshest, I'm the sharpest, I got the most flow, I got the this and this and that. So it's like you have your ego on display, but it's in a rhythmic sense. So we made music, so it's like you can't even I wasn't even able to really make music that was egotistic in the language. It had that feeling, but just like if you started translating it, I'm just like talking about good stuff. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm just talking positive. I'm just saying positive things. It's like it doesn't allow you to really do it. Like my sons would be able to do it a little bit. They would be able to like access the ego because that was their first language and that was the only language the ego had access to them through. But it's still different. Like coming from English to the language, I was able to like circumvent it. So it's like I'm around it, and I can I've made it kind of docile to the point where I've even communicated with it like as it's in its regular form as a little child. So this little scared child behind a curtain. So I'm not interested in really feeding it, right? They do stuff like whatever city you was born in, like you from, they were like, yeah, shut down. Look, shut down, and that's like fuel for the ego, right? And I'm just like, yeah, I was born there and raised, but like the city don't got my back. If something happens, Chi-Town ain't gonna come and be like, I got you, Crom. Like no, it depends completely on me and everybody else that's like Chi-Town. Same thing, New York, at ATL, California, whatever it is, wherever you're from. Though they have little subtle things, and the English language promotes all of this that stimulates the ego. You got a sports team that you follow. You got a musician or artist that comes from a particular area that you're from. All of that stuff is like little fuel for the ego. So when you can get to the point where you can where you don't see that, or you can see how it lights a path of fire to your ego, and you just put it out, right? And only after this is after 25 years of speaking another language, speaking our language, right? So I can't even explain how that process even works, but I can explain that this is where I am as a result of it.
Okay. What things do you think, or I should say more so, what type of people do you think that would be more interested in Nuwaubik, as opposed to just people who are just pretty much interested in all this heavy knowledge?
People who are interested, in my experience, the people who are interested in the language are one, people who have heard the information, may have heard it, may have not have heard it, or just might be conscious in general, but not really into the conscious information, right? They know that it's something out there, it's something better, whatever, but they're tired of all the rhetoric, you know, and they like, look, is there something that we can really tap into and do that's going to really make a difference, a change? And then when they hear language, and they might just hear somebody speaking, and they be like, what is that? And it'll speak to them. Just like people heard Dr. York's voice and was like, I need to be where that man is. Or, you know what I'm saying? They didn't even take them reading doctrine. They just heard them. They like, yeah, I need to be over there. So it's the language. You hear the language, you be like, yeah, I need to learn that. I need, wherever that's being taught, I need to learn that. So that's one of the reasons we made music, because music would be a more powerful way of creating sending a message out there to people. They're like, what language is that? You know, and then you're gonna get two types of people. You're gonna get people that say, what language is that? I'm interested. And then type of people, what language is that? Like, you know, is it possible? What are they saying? I want to know what they're saying. So you get those two types of people when they hear it. And the ones who are sincere, they're like, man, I feel it. I don't know what they're saying, but I feel that, right? We listened to Les Nubians back in the 90s when they came out, and they were French. They were speaking in French. Well, doggone well we don't speak French, but we was vibing with them, right? We was vibing with everything that they were singing. I love Lady Smith Black Mambazo. I couldn't tell you none of what he was saying, like what the translation, but I felt every last tone that they sung in. You know, and I'll be singing with them, and people think I know the words. You know, I'm there, you know, they're like, oh, you know the song. Like, I don't know the words, but I feel the rhythm, I feel the energy, I feel the tones, and it's like you feel music like that. So why not make music that people, and that could be your most powerful teacher, right? I did a series of videos when my children were younger called Learn Your Language. And I did it as a kind of an attempt to kind of share something with the family. One of the things that they blocked, you talking about skeet shooting? Every time I came to do something, they was like, oh, bam, they was blasting it out the sky. So I did a series of videos called Learn Your Language, and it was literally like a sitcom with my children. And we just went over language concepts. And it was for Nuwaubik. But it was like it had a little humor in it. We had like our blooper reel at the end, but it was a series of like 13 videos. That's how far I got. It was 13 videos. We did the videos, and it teaches the basics of the language of Nuwaubik, you know. But it was stuff like that. I said I'd rather do something like that than actually teach it, because, you know, people can just watch it and they can enjoy it and watch it, and then they can ask questions off of that. Then we can use that to build into something else, and then we can create another situation with it, and so on and so forth. So, you know.
Okay. Well, with that being said, hold up. So this sister says it sounds contradictory with all due respect.
Yeah, because of the English language.
What sounds contradictory?
Whatever. I don't know. I mean, I'd have to, you know, I would ask respectfully, what is it that sounds contradictory?
Okay, Miss Rhonda, what sounds contradictory? I'm waiting on the answer to that.
Okay. I mean, and I've heard, like I said, I've had people say things like that is contradictory before.
I think that this is okay because I know her. That's my my divine feminine mentor speaking, okay. And her thing has always been in order to. And I read to her the question I asked you prior. Remember, it was on a late night, and some confusion had sparked. I'm not really going to get into that because I don't really like replaying confusion. But as far as when it comes to learning this stems from as far as learning the language as opposed to the doctrine, because I understand the importance of the doctrine. And let me just say this first. I understand the importance of learning the doctrine, and I understand the importance of the language. But I understand that at this stage, if we're talking about an upgrade, the upgrade should be learning the doctrine in the language. And in order to do that, you must know the language first, as opposed to you have I noticed that you're the only person that I know right now that I know now. I'm not saying that there's no other people besides myself that literally speak Nuwaubik fluently, been speaking Nuwaubik fluently for quite some time, and that places that as the forefront of teaching, as far as like teaching it. So there's a lot of things going on. Will teaching it be classroom based only? Okay, and I'm gonna finish this thought and then I'm gonna read the next two questions because she has two more questions. I think that there is a discrepancy in the community amongst certain individuals that feel that by teaching the language first, or only, if I can use those words, that the doctrine will be lost or the information. Whereas I think from you, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, for me, I understand the doctrine in the language.
Yeah.
I understand how to interpret, like literally taking the language of Nuwaubik and transmitting Nuwabu through it. I understand that. I'm sure you do too, but I don't think that that's thoroughly understood. So she says, explain how the pineal gland works. No, wait a minute. The first one is Purple Royal. She says, will teaching it be classroom-based only or audio and books?
That's for you, right?
Oh, I'm giving all around the board. Like I'm all around the board with it. So if you asking me that, I thought she was asking you. If she's asking me that, the classes are done through a PowerPoint system that I have on my YouTube channel, TikTok, which is more shortly based phrases and phraseology, so to speak, right. As well as live classes, and I'm putting together books. So if that was for me, that's my particular answer for that. Okay, so the sister Rhonda says, explain how the pineal gland works.
How it works?
That's the question. I don't know if that's in relation to the language influence, but because you're the language teacher, proceed with that.
So, like, there is an English explanation as to how the pineal gland works. And that explanation, whether it's dealing with connecting you to the higher vibration of yourself, whether it's the doorway to the third, the third eye chakra, like whatever it is, these are all like English language interpretations of what it does. So I don't understand like where that, like how that fits. Like I know that speaking the language has an effect, a positive effect on your pineal gland opening up and you being able to have access to higher realities and higher realms of thinking. It does have an effect. Not to say that you can't open your pineal gland up through like just meditation and things like that, but knowing that the English language is a language of spells, we have to really be careful on how we interpret stuff, like, you know what I'm saying, and where we get our interpretations and things like that from. I've had so many conversations with our people about definitions and interpretations. The word nice, the etymology of that word means, stupid, like dumb or ignorant, easy.
Ignorant, yeah.
Right. The word fun, the etymology of fun is like to deceive, to trick. So it's like they're playing games with us with these words purposely. But the main reason that they're doing that is so that we can always have a contradictory idealism in how we deal with each other. You know what I'm saying? We come together, we don't really come together to build, we come together to kind of test each other, to see if you know what I feel that you should know, or you know what you say you know, and blah blah blah. Because the introduction was always done through the ego, and everybody's coming because they have something to. You ever been in a situation where you was in a room with some people, and instead of it being a build session, it was a how big my package section is. You know, everybody still want to be,
Yeah.
even if it was doctrine, my experience, or the funniest one to me has been the circles where we were talking about our experience with the master teacher, and instead of it being just a healthy share, people trying to be like their experience was more spiritual than the next.
Well, see, he gave me this name, and
right,
and that led me, and he told me, I'm like, hold up, bro, like,
and it's like that's not why I'm here. I just was sharing my experience with you. So it's like that's the that's the contradictory energy of just the English language before we even get into the discussion. The words have done that to us through Western curriculum. So again, it puts us in a position where if you are sincere about like raising your frequency and things like that, and you understand what has happened to us as a body of people, then we'll realize that truthfully, where we get to, where the builds and things that we do when we come together, there has to be very little English spoken. So we need to communicate, so it only makes sense. Let us communicate in our language.
This person has another question. Purple Royal says, are principles or disciplines part of the language?
Yes.
I would say yes, because you've got rules, and these rules can communicate a certain message, but go ahead.
Yeah, and even before you get to that, the principles are within. It's like if you're not learning this language because you feel that you need to access existence from a higher frequency, then why you learn the language? That's a principle. The discipline, like I said earlier, is when your mind gets to the point where you understand that this is a realm that I've created. I've literally created a dimension within my own thought process where there's only one language spoken there. And that language is where I will take residence, I will take refuge and be and exist for the majority of the time throughout the day. So that's a discipline, just like spirituality, like meditation. You create these disciplines and things like that. So the language itself, it has the guidelines that you follow, right? Conjugations and different things like that. But all of that comes in time from the practical use of it. If you was in a group, you had a group of people and all y'all did was just say the words together to make sentences and stuff. You didn't use no conjugation. After a while, from the continued use of it, it'll start to develop. It'll come. They'll start, it's easy to say this, so I'm gonna say it this way. And they'll come, you be like, "It's funny," and you, "Oh, okay. Look, RZ." And so it's like I get it, because you're shortening it for convenience, but all of this is just happening, and there's no interpretation of why you're doing it. It's just happening as a part of the language. So the way you started speaking it after 6 months, it may sound completely different, because now you've found that frequency, and you all are vibrating on that frequency. And at that point, certain things are not allowed in. So that's what the principles and the disciplines will help to make sure that those lower frequencies don't come in there. There's no space in Nuwaubik, any of the iterations of Nuwaubik, there's no space for low frequency English interpretation. There's no room for it. But that's what always happens when you're teaching it. Every last Nuwaubik class that I've taught for adults, there's always been the point where the English interpretation wants to come in and take root. And every time at every opportunity, I blasted it out of there. And once I did that, the interest dropped. People stopped coming. So it showed me what they were really there for. And I'm not there for that. I'm not in the game for that. You know what I'm saying? We in the game for a whole different reason. I see 500 years from now, a nation of people speaking various dialects of the language, and we're building and we're doing everything, but everything is coming through the language. And I see a point where the English language literally dies amongst us. I see that. Most people don't see that.
I definitely see it, because, man, listen, I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, when I first left the community and started teaching Nuwaubik to outside people, that's what qualified them to walk with me or not. If you learn the language, you was family. If not, your ass getting left behind. It's just as simple as that. Like, I don't even got no time to be sitting
Right.
here holding your hand, bro. Like, no,
Right.
we talk this way because this is what I try to tell most people. Any type of social movement, spiritual movement, or whatever you want to call it, all come to change three things about the person that it tries to reach. It comes to change the way you think, the way you speak, and the way you act. It's going to change the way you think because all of them come along with some type of doctrine or knowledge system or information that's supposed to liberate the mind from whatever previously you were doing to what the particular social movement suggests that you should do. It changes the way you speak because all of them have a lingo or a language that is relative to talking with inside of this group that you're a part of. And it comes to change the way that you act or conduct because it gives you rules and regulations or divine laws and rules and regulations that should guide the behavior. What I'm saying is, or what I've been saying to people for years, is that the language contains all of that. The language contains the way you should think because it's definitely going to change the way you think based on the actual sentence structure, the patterns of speech, the syntax, the philology, and all of the above. It's going to change the way you act because the way that it's structured for it to be spoken. Now, with Nuwaubik is sort of to me unique. It's very unique because Nuwaubik can be spoken in multitudes of ways. Like I tell people, I can say Anazahup, Nukzahup, right? I go, or I can say Anazahuptu, Nukzahuptu, I go, or I can just say Zahuptu, and it means I go. Nuwaubik can be spoken in like a vast amount of different ways that it's a code within inside of code within inside of a code. However, the language by itself breeds culture, and I don't think that has been actually conveyed to people clearly enough, concisely enough, and comprehensive enough for them to realize that all of that comes with the language. They just look at it, oh, we just speaking. No, we're doing more than speaking.
Yeah. Language seeds culture. That is a
Yeah.
very well-known fact. It seeds culture. If you are not, if you're not speaking a language, then you're mimicking culture, and that's what we've been accustomed to doing. We just mimicking culture. But when you speak in a language, that immediately attaches you to the culture. And even if you're just talking about pancakes, you are attached to the culture of it because you're speaking the frequency. And like with the three things you said, like the action changes because the frequency of you changes when you're speaking the language. When you start speaking the language of whatever the new ideology is, it changes your frequency, right? People who've read all of Honorable Elijah Muhammad's books think like him, act like him, talk like him. Malcolm X, everybody. I mean, when the master teacher, with the number of books that he's written, you see people that literally are replicas of that image of him being the teacher, the master teacher. That's one aspect of it. But because he brought an actual language for us, we're supposed to jump in the language and see all of the doctrine that is within that language. We're supposed to be able to break the language down into levels from within itself, not from English. And that's what people started trying to do. They started trying to give the Nuwaubik codes, but they started doing it from English perspective, which allows the enemy into the gates, right? But when you step out of, so when we make music and you listen to it, somebody who speaks Nuwaubik, you'll hear a lot of the dialects used together because it's ours and we can do that. You know what I'm saying? So you might hear you might hear something that comes from the Nubic or comes from the first Nuwaubik, but then it'll be interpolated with the Kaluic and the Yamasic and the, you know what I'm saying? So you'll hear that. So right. It shows that we are within the language creating our own code system within the language. We're not doing it from the English perspective. So that's significant, which is why the conversation about the language should never get to the point where it's just an English conversation about the language. At a certain point, it's gotta be.
I see exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
At a certain point, it's gotta be, okay, now we are ready to do some discussion and some real discussion. But then a lot of people get left out, which is where that frustration comes from, because they're a lot of people may not be there for the right reason. If you're frustrated about the fact that you don't understand what the language is, but you came there to learn it, then why did you come there to learn it? As opposed to somebody who was sincere, who came there to learn it, and then they get that oh, I don't know what they said. Let me tune in. Let me just shut up and listen. And then eventually, oh, I know that one. I know that. And then context clues. You'll be able to put basic conversation together by you just studying your vocabulary and whatever you've been given by your teacher. And now you in the game. Because that's how I learned Arabic. When I moved in, I was speaking Arabic fluently in 3 months because I was shut up and listen. I didn't try to come and be like, man, I don't understand that. What y'all talking about, man? Tell me what you're talking about. Let me hear what you say it again. I just was like, and I would listen to them. I would listen to the Salat boys. I would listen to them talk, and Mukminun Sagor. I would listen to them talk, and I'm like, and I would pick up stuff. Then when I heard the Mukminun Kibar talk, I would listen. And I pick up, okay, and then eventually I started responding. And they're like, oh, do Kareem, they like, and it kind of welcomed me into the circle slowly but surely. And then eventually I realized, okay, this is all I had to do was open myself up to it. And again, the English language makes you close yourself, and it wants to make you open up a special door where the English controls everything that comes through it.
Do you think that at a certain time frame in a person's life that their mind just shut down for language
completely
acquisition?
No. Like my mother was my best student. She was like 50 and she was
I remember you told me that.
Yeah, you shut yourself down. You can shut yourself down and shut yourself off from it. But that's completely conscious. That's a conscious decision that you make. It's not like your body,
I ain't gonna get this. I don't know them words.
Right. It can't, and all that stuff. So you literally create the cutoff point, and people do that as early as in their 20s. You know what I'm saying? Man, that's too hard. If I ain't learned in school, I ain't gonna never learn it. Like, word. So if you get another job, you ain't gonna learn what it takes to work that other job. Well, that's different. That's, oh, okay. So I see what, you're basing your idealisms off of mortality and, the fact that you refuse to step into your role as a guide. So, okay, I got you,
Yeah, that's out the window.
That's
so
that's when we do the tone, wa, dua, and tutin.
Goodbye to you.
Yeah.
But would you say that there is a spiritual aspect of the language?
189%. And what's beautiful about it is that the spiritual aspect takes effect as soon as you start speaking it, without you even having to do spiritual stuff, because you're speaking something that's of a higher frequency, and because of that, it's tapping you into your innate spirituality that connects to earth and that connects to the universe, that has nothing to do with religion. So you activate it as soon as you start using the language practically. So you're connected. That's what I love about it, because it's like, there it is. It helped me to kind of redefine what true spirituality is. Because of course, coming up religious, you have that definition. Then you come into the doctrine, and now you have a new interpretation of spirituality. But it's just that. It's an interpretation using a bunch of words of what spirituality is, right? But then you come into language, the language aspect, the tonal part of spirituality, and then you realize it really isn't any of that stuff. It's literally how much of a connection you have with yourself, with nature, with those around you who vibrate at the various frequencies that they do, and ultimately your connection with the universe. And that determines your spirituality. If you have no connection, then your spirituality is low. When you start listening and you start hearing stuff, you start hearing the song of the trees when the wind is blowing, you start hearing the language of the animals and the insects and things like that, then you're starting to reconnect and tap back in. And having a language that allows you a higher frequency when you're using it is kind of a key to that. It's a catalyst.
I noticed that when we do lives about Nuwaubik, the chats are not, or the viewers are not as in attendance as if I was to do a live about some information. I don't understand what people I don't understand like what what people see in information that, not even that, I already know that. I don't understand what they don't see in the language. It's like, where's the glitch coming in?
Because information has been presented like crack, and crack has always been more desirable than the stuff that it takes an effort to acquire, right? So people are cracked out on information. So whenever some new information come up, that's a new rock, you know. And so it's like, because of the information crack epidemic, people are not like, it takes effort to learn language. Like, you have to step outside of you don't just slip into alpha mode and just learn doctrine. Like, you have to consciously make an effort and practically apply language. So, that's the difference. So it's not as appealing as the fast food type crack, like the information. I get that. I get it now. It makes me say ooh and ah and blah blah blah. Then I can take it immediately and regurgitate it and sound deep to somebody else. That's a big part of it that a lot of people don't pay attention to. A lot of people look for that quick information because they can't wait to run to their little circles that they've created and sound heavy, right? And these people, where are you getting this from? And they're like, I've connected it to the divine. Like, just got that information from you. So, and they can't do that with the language. Who they can go. I mean, you can go and sound heavy around some people, say words and stuff like that. They'd be like, oh, that's so nice. Another language. But then after a while, it's like, okay, well, what else can you do? And you got to come up with another language trick. And it's like, so that means that they're not in it for the right reason. So you want to make sure that you understand the reasoning that you're there. And if you don't know, if you're not sure about why you're learning the language, then you're going to fall into that bracket. So you'll see it. Now, there's going to come a time where you're going to have droves of people jumping into your classes because they're going to be looking to be saved.
Okay, Purple Royal says, is the history of the language also important?
It's important as information that is taught, that so it becomes a part of the story of the language as it's taught to the children. Now, the history in the language, not the interpreted history of the language, meaning, when my grandchildren hear about Kaluic, they're going to just hear the story of how it came from their Yeo, and what I'm saying, my story, and so it'll be told to them as their childhood stories growing up, but it'll be the history of the language. They'll learn about the master teacher, and they'll learn about Nuwaubik and the various iterations of Nuwaubik, and they'll learn about all of the they'll learn about it, but it'll be told to them as like a part of their story. So at that point, it'll be, it's important. Now, people who are learning the language from the English perspective, that's the education, that's the doctrine part. Like, that's, what I'm saying? That's like,
Nuwaubik was giving them the actual knowledge of the language, right?
So, but that's not going to benefit you learning the actual language. It's just information for you to have so that you can say, this is the history of the language. But, you might not want to say that around the wrong people. Just, and I say that because, like I said, our dependence on the English language has made us such victims to everybody. It made us victims to the point where when they was doing what they was doing on Tamaray, they had learned the basic Nuwaubik words that the brothers was using on the walkie-talkies and was listening in on the conversations. So it don't take much to learn a couple of words that people use as a code to, so it's like they was able to learn that, and they was able to pick us apart because we kept giving them back doors into everything that we was doing. So like I said again, the history is there. Is not as important as the practical application of the language, but it's still a part of it. It's like you learn that when you're practically applying it. It's time for me to tell you the history of the language, but now I'm speaking in the language to you about the history of the language. So it's going to be like I'm telling you, I'm relating a bedtime story, or I'm giving you the traditions and things like that. So it comes across differently. We can even, in a lot of cultures, they don't even sit down and tell you a story. They'll do a dance, or they'll have a song, and the song tells you the story. So it's like we've forgotten about the whole process of the griot and the relation of information from generation to generation because of the English language.
Okay, we have how you doing, Sherilyn? Rahul Bat says, peace. All right, so uh Rhonda says, I guess she wanted to know about the science of how the pineal gland work with the knowledge of breaking the spell with the language. I think that's kind of a loaded question. Like,
Yeah, because you still are seeking to access the pineal gland through English, because the pineal gland is the mastery of doctrine, or the learning of doctrine, stimulates you to attune yourself in with the pineal gland, to even understand the fact that it's something that's there, that's connecting you to something else. But it's the language that's the key, that unlocks it. So it's the language unlocks the access to the pineal gland. But you have to be able to step away from the English interpretation in order to even understand what's going on, right? Because we're doing everything to the, okay, I attended, an event this past yesterday, and it was a lot of like spiritual booths and stuff that people had set up. They was doing like Reiki and spiritual massage, and one lady had these giant sound bowls that you could stand in, and she hit the bowl, and so they doing all of this work, right? And it's not us, it's others doing that work. So they've accessed a lot of these sciences and principles that were ours, that were, we had within our indigenous communities and societies. So now we don't have them anymore. So we're having to go back and access these again through our children. So it's like, where do we drop the ball? So when we start talking about things like the pineal gland, like, what was it called before it was called the pineal gland? You know what I'm saying? Before they called them the chakras, before they called it the pituitary gland, what did we refer to it as? Right?
right.
So that now that's a history thing that's important, that we'll tap into, but we have to be using language. Like, I wouldn't explain the pineal gland to my children using an English interpretation, right? It would be completely in the language, and it would be completely simplified to the point where they would be able to acknowledge and realize exactly what's happening with it. But a person in English wouldn't understand that. I don't understand what you mean. I don't understand, because they need something. They need words to build a picture for them, as opposed to tones that speak a whole universe to you.
Yeah, that's a whole different level. That's a whole different level, because I'm just as you speak, I'm just reverting back in my mind when I was little and growing up in the community, how they would talk to us in a certain kind of way, and we knew off gate what really they were saying. Like, it wasn't no, you got to translate it, or we need to see it this way or that way. Like, Wahed is Wahed to me. Wahed is this. Wahed is not one. Wahed is this to me. Itneen is this. Thalatha is this.
Right.
Khamsa is this. Arba is this. So in my mind, it's like that type of thinking in itself is more divergent than the English thinking. And now I see, by having this live with you, why those who are on doctrine more harder than language, and why those who are language more harder than doctrine. It's not to say that either side don't want the other side. I think that there is an extreme. Like, for me, there is an extreme with language as opposed to doctrine, because I understand the formula, so to speak, in order to get us back to a certain biorhythm, right? As a people that vibrate with the tones of the planet, and how that shapes our psyche. So we have another question. Okay, so Purple Royal says, if not English, what frame of reference do we use? Tones? That was a double question.
She answered the question.
Yes, Purple Royal. Tones are the frame of reference that we use.
That's the frame of reference. We just again, we're so dependent on the English interpretations of things, because we've allowed ourselves to step down from that perception of things. When we were babies, we were very in tune with tones, and that was how we gauged things, until we were taught to say words and then use interpretations and mimic all these different things. So we fell from grace. So
Right.
it's the tones, but we have to allow ourselves to get back to that point to where we can even feel them and use them like that. That's why I said that's why the majority of the things that I use in teaching the language are rhythmic or musical or visual. A lot of just talking about the language. You're not, because you're gonna get people that want to say stuff and be important, and they're gonna want to what do you call it, filibuster, and they're gonna want to come go on this whole thing. If you start breaking down stuff, and it's like that, we're here for the language, we're not here for doctrine. And people don't understand that, and people will get an attitude, and they'll be like, well, it's the doctrine is the important part, and it's like there's really no, like, again, the doctrine was for humanity, the language was for us. And once we understood that, and again, the master teacher said there's a point that we were supposed to get to where he could start really teaching us what he wanted to teach us, but we couldn't be speaking and using words. So it was joy, it was telepathy. We had to get to that point. You're not going to get to telepathy from English. English
no.
won't even let you shut the hell up. It won't even let us shut the hell up. We got to keep talking. Because if we don't keep talking, the language starts to die. If you got a group of people and for 30 days said you can't speak English for 30 days, people will start literally losing their minds, because the language would start to die. And as it started to die, it would start to take portions of your mindset with you if you hadn't gotten to a point where you could do without it. And that's real. That's like science right there. That's so the spell is real. The grimoire, the grammar, the spell of the English language, that's a real thing. So we because we won't let it go, it got us in a chokehold. It literally has us in a chokehold. That's why everything has to be an interpretation. It has to be in an opinion. It has to have stand on something. It has to be this 100% universal facts and truth. And it has to be a difference between the truth and the belief and all of these words. I wrote a book literally called "Shut the Fuck Up." That's the title of the book. And the book, the premise of the book was everybody has the license to talk, but everybody doesn't exercise that license. You don't have to exercise it all the time. When do you have the right to talk? Nature lets you know when you have the right to talk. Like if you have a license to drive a car, are you going to get into every car that you see and drive it? No. You're going to drive whatever damn car you have access to. If you have a license to be a chef, every time you go in the kitchen, you're not going to be, let's chef it up here. Let me show you how to. No. Sometimes you're going to want to go in there and eat a bowl of cereal. So having the license to something doesn't mean that you always have the right. So talking, we have the license to talk. And we use that goddamn license unequivocally, unrestricted, unabashed, whatever other words you want to use to describe it. We use that to death. And then when it's time when nature says it's time to talk, either we're already talking and we missed the point, or we own something else and we ain't even heard it. And that right there stops that connection from having with our higher self. Now we got to interpret it. So as we're interpreting all this stuff, the ego is running full blast. So now I can't be proven wrong. You can't say nothing to me that makes me wrong. Dude, I love being proved wrong. People come and they tell me something, they correct me about something. I'm like, okay. But then that makes me go back and I'm like, yo, that shit was wrong. Let me, and it opens me up to a whole new level of information. And that's what I did with the language, because I understood, like, okay, I don't want to be that dude that's like, well, you're speaking it wrong and blah, blah, blah. But when I realized it's not even about, and I heard this from the master teacher, it's the children that are going to perfect the language. So what the hell are we doing as adults talking about the proper way to speak it and the this and this and that? We don't know shit. We just want to be important and say important things. And it's like, until we get ourselves to the point where we can be humble, right? We refuse to humble ourselves to each other. That's where the wisdom is. Like, man, I got so many big brothers and uncles and adopted mothers and fathers and big sisters, because I'm always willing to learn something. Everybody got something to teach. I'm like, man, I can't wait to learn what I'm gonna learn from you. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it's that I'm fortunate to have been able to acknowledge and see this, but I have to acknowledge that it's because of the language. And I've spoken it for so long, it's allowed me to see some things that people who speak English and have only spoken English and are not making real efforts to learn any other language will never see. They'll never see it because the only frequency they know is the English language. How can you tell somebody who speaks another language about the things that they feel? You can't. It's just an interpretation. So, you know, Roddy damn die. Sorry.
Okay. So with that being said, family, I'm gonna look back in the chat. It's almost 5. All right. So no more questions. So I dropped the brother Cash App in the comment section if y'all want to show the brother some love. Let's go ahead, man, and get on this language hard, man. Let's just stop fighting it. Okay. The spell is broken through language because the spell is in the spelling of the words. Yes, we all agree that the doctrine is very important. However, the doctrine itself should travel through the language, not through English. I think that the brother and I can both agree to that. If the information that we were being taught was through the language, as the language has been constructed to raise our biorhythms, right, and to be able to raise our frequencies, then it should travel through the language. The language is the conduit, right? And I think that you'll agree with that. So with that being said, family, Wado, and I'm definitely going to reach out to you, Brother Karaam. I appreciate you coming up here, man, and giving us your wisdom and stuff like that, especially with the curriculum. That's definitely something we need. If you look around my office, I don't got nothing but books. I got books packed up. I'm in it all day, every day. But I'd love to have you back for a part 3, man, and maybe we can next time I want to actually spark some dialogue and let people hear how it's spoken in different dialects and stuff like that to pique their interest.
All right.
All right. Wadu.